Okay. Insert podcast jingle.
Do.
Do 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 do. Welcome to Opposably, the podcast.
Oh, Opposapod.
Opposapod. Yes. First episode of a podcast that we are doing with the aim of talking about things in general, I think.
Yeah.
Or politics, or just things in general.
I mean, it's probably going to be a lot of politics. So
Probably
I
a
can
lot of
already
politics.
see that this is going to cause a lot of divide between like a lot of different people. But we promise it's going to be nuanced discussion more than anything.
Yes.
Though we do have very strong opinions about certain things, and we cannot hide that sort of bias. But it is what it is.
Yes. And why is it called Opposably? Because it's all about finding the truth between opposing views. The kind of idea to start with was that people always have opposing views, and you read articles that are always biased in one way or the other, and that the truth is often in the middle. And I think that's kind of the focus of this so far, and the name. It's like we're gonna face opinions against each other. And then,
sounds like an ad read for Ground News.
yeah, it sounds a bit like an ad read for Ground News, but a bit different. Because
We're not sponsored by Ground News, by the way.
No, we're not. And I guess our approach is a bit more not data-driven. Yet. Not yet.
It's just what we see for our own peepers.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
What
think
we
also...
read.
Also, Ground News is very, like... based in Western left versus right culture, which like it can simplify a lot of things, dumb them down in a way where
I mean, well, Ground News is like, this is going to sound like an advertisement now, I should say, but no, it's like with Ground News, it's more they give you article. They're a news aggregator rather than an actual like news site themselves. Like they're just sort of getting articles from different like sort of sides of the spectrum. So they're not like an actual sort of news site. They're a news aggregator.
Yeah. Whereas I think here we're going to try and investigate issues, try and find things on both sides, and then try and find the truth in the middle, whether that's about politics or media or entertainment.
Should we talk about Israel then?
Oh God! Maybe not.
We're not prepared. We are not mentally prepared to dive into such a discussion.
Maybe not for episode 1.
No.
We've also discussed is the US becoming China, and I think that's also a bit too much for episode 1. But those are the sort of subjects we're thinking of. So
you know, we've got to ease people in with our sort of discussions.
Yeah.
Life.
So I think we settled today about talking about things in the UK in general right now, because that's where we are both living, in the beautiful United Kingdom, where things are, like a lot of the rest of the world, a bit chaotic right now. So we're thinking, first episode, just a relaxed, informal talk about current affairs. What do you think of current affairs? Oh yeah, should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, I think that's a good shout.
I think they're good, the current affairs. They're all right. So, my name's Doran, and that's me basically, and with me is Elliot.
Hello,
Elliot, and we started trying to work on this idea of Opposably a few months ago, and I think that's not. I mean, what else do you need to know about us, really?
It's still developing.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got your jobs.
Yes.
I've got mine. So
yes, I mean, just like a lot of podcasts, this is very much a hobby project for us to start with. Who knows where it takes us? But
we've never done anything like this before, so this is going to be a very interesting exercise. I mean, we're already showing right now from the way we're talking that we're not very astute in this whole discussing things down a microphone.
I think we've already confirmed trope number 1 of podcasts is we've been talking for I don't know, at least 10 minutes, and we have not reached the subject of this episode.
I mean, that's what podcasts are. It's just there may be a topic, but it kind of meanders
meandering. It's going to be a lot of meandering.
When you're talking about heavy topics, and then you just go like, "Oh, actually, I want to talk to you about something really funny."
Yeah.
Because we need that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's all about the retention.
The retention.
Sorry, I do come from a digital marketing background, so full disclosure, if I do say words like that, I do apologise in advance.
Content, retention, all that banned words from the podcast.
We're banned.
Just banned.
Like, I am aware this is important stuff, but I quite also value, not quite value, I very much do value, like, good quality work.
Yes, and to be fair, we'll probably get a lot better as we go. We're just starting out here, so, we're just winging our first episodes. That's,
Yeah,
you gotta start somewhere, right? So, should we actually try and start talking about vaguely what we wanted to talk about today? So I've just loaded up a BBC News page, the homepage. I guess we can just take some of the news. First one's about Israel, so no, we said not for episode 1. That's not UK affairs either. So let's go on England. Alright. What should we... What do we feel like addressing on this, like, general vibe of the UK right now?
I mean, if you're just a citizen of the UK, you just understand just how much politics is an absolute shambles right now.
Yeah.
Try not to swear too much.
Is shambles a swear word?
I know, because I almost said another word. That's
okay.
Another word that begins with sh.
We're gonna try and keep it family friendly. Yeah.
For a while.
At least for a while. So, yeah, I mean, there's been the Southport cases. That's really intense. There's been Elon Musk interfering with our politics. That's also a very intense subject. There's been the budget leading to a lot of difficulties for people on the job market. That's also another thing we could talk about. I mean, in general, it's hard to, I think, right now to be that optimistic. And I don't think we want the show to be a bummer at all. If anything, kind of discussing things to make more sense of it. But I think it's understandable.
That something is going to be a bummer every now and again.
Exactly. I think
especially where we're at right now in terms of
yeah,
our culture, I should say.
Yeah. And that's definitely part of why we decide to do this, is like try and discuss these things, try and maybe, hopefully, like make sense of it ourselves and help other people make sense of it. But I think in general, I think it's a like really, really difficult time for job seekers, like people looking for jobs right now, because the budget in the UK has really, it has increased the cost that employers have to hire people. And as a result, there's more people looking for jobs because people have been made redundant, etc., because of the like slowing growth in the economy. But at the same time, employers are looking to employ less people because the costs have gone up. So it's like this perfect storm right now of more people looking for jobs and less jobs. And employers not willing to pay that much, or at least to try and get away with as little as possible. So I think that's one key thing with the UK right now that probably is contributing to how, unhappy a lot of people seem to be.
I mean, you just hear it everywhere, like people just sort of just go, wages are going up but not in line with inflation, and there's only so much of inflation that I know. I mean, I do try to sort of make sense of it, but I know the general sense is like, obviously, you want things to sort of be in line with, like, if the value of money is going up, you want to make sure that all the goods are going up in line with said value. And I guess
they are so not.
I mean, what's your knowledge of how inflation works?
Well, man, inflation is like an endless subject in economics and stuff. All I know is that inflation, if it goes up, the price of everything goes up, And usually salaries should follow as well. But the problem that is always been the case, but I think it's worse and worse, is that the salaries take too long to catch up to the like higher cost of things, so that there's a whole year or two where you're just kind of being, on average, kind of screwed over because like everything's more expensive, but your salary will take a year or two to catch up, and you're always playing that catch-up game. And because of last year and the year before, like inflation being super high, I think now everyone's kind of really been left behind. Was like costs of pretty much everything went up 10%, but most people's salaries did not go up 10%. I know certainly mine hasn't, and yours hasn't either. So we're not necessarily representative of the average, but talking about most of our friends, I think most people have not seen that increase in wages, and on average, people are a bit worse off. Yeah.
Why does it take so long?
I think it's just, why does it take so long? I think it's because employers can get away with it. Because you get the inflation, and unless you're working in a job where there's a very strong union, no one's going to force your employer to raise the salary, to match inflation.
But then surely, if they don't, surely they must be contributing to higher inflation themselves then, because they're not sort of, they're not actually doing things to sort of curtail it.
Yeah, it's kind of it's weird with inflation, and that's why I say it's such a complicated subject, because it's like, on the other hand, if the employers immediately put your salaries up, then people would buy more things at the higher price, leading to even more inflation. So it's just kind of wild. I think maybe we could do a deep dive on just inflation at some point, because it is a very complex subject, and there's a lot of discussion and people disagreeing about how it works. And you'll hear one economist say one thing and the other one say the opposite, and they're both experts in the matter, and it's just how do you make sense of all of this? But yeah, that's why I was saying, all I know is on a kind of very simple level is it goes up, you pay more for things, and usually your salary doesn't follow up in time, so it just means everything's a bit more expensive short term. And the reason for it is because money becomes less valuable with time. And the problem is, the more there's money on the market, the less valuable it becomes. So, at least, if I got this horribly wrong, please correct me. I guess we'll try and get a email set up for people to tell us what they think we got wrong or right. Yeah.
We're definitely not clear. We're gonna do the stereotypical preface of any podcast that we're not experts in much things. We do try and understand, but we like to think we're quite media literate. I do have a background in I do have a journalism degree, if that's any salt in any sort of in any sort of field. It's just more observations.
Yeah, I think particularly this episode, we have just winged it. I think in the future I would probably want to research things a tiny bit more beforehand, but also natural conversation is good. But yeah, if it helps, I have also studied a tiny bit of economics in my time, and so that's where I get my ideas from. But again, inflation, I feel can nearly be a bit of a subjective thing, where objectively, one thing I know is inflation ideally should be between 2 to 4-ish%, because having no inflation is bad as well for the economy. I can't I would love to explain exactly why, but I know that is more or less the case, and most people, economists and stuff, agree 1 to 4-ish% is roughly fine for inflation, but anything above that starts really skewing things. And I think, was it 2 years ago we had 10 or 12? 1 year ago? I can't even remember anymore. And now it's gone up again recently. So it's been too high. By people objectively agree it's been too high in the UK in the last few years. And things the results of the American election are just gonna make things worse because of tariffs happening. And those are going to drive inflation even more, because it's another one of those things 15% tariffs on things means that everything is pretty much going to become 15% more expensive, which is going to lead to more inflation.
But isn't so obviously we're kind of meandering from tariffs because we don't sort of have tariff issues here at the moment.
Not yet,
Anyway.
But also we buy lots of UK stuff, European stuff and like Chinese products. Like it's still going to affect the UK at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I was sort of looking about the whole tariff thing, and from what I sort of glean or understand or whatever, is like, isn't like the employers the ones who pay the actual tariff? So in the end, it's like the American people who pay more, pay more. Like they're the ones who get affected by the tariff. Like it's not the country that they're applying it onto.
I think it's one of those things where actually no one wins. I think it's just a lose-lose, because the problem is, like, if the US managed to impose tariffs on all countries and not get tariffed back, then yeah, they would win. But the problem is, like, countries like China and Europe in general, not just like the region of Europe, retaliated pretty much immediately by saying, oh, we're going to put our own tariffs on your imports and exports. So it means pretty much everyone's paying the price at the end of the day, because it means things become more expensive. So people selling their goods have to put the prices up. People buying those goods have to buy them at a higher price and therefore sell them at a higher price at the end consumer. So at the end of the day, everyone's paying more. Like, that's why it would drive up inflation. At least that's my opinion. It's like, in the end, it's just going to drive the price of everything up.
But what does Trump think that is going to happen if he's going to put a tariff on someone? Is he that, like, cocksure about himself that he's not going to get a tariff, like, imposed on him straight back?
I think part of him hoped that, like, he could play that bargaining chip of, like, well, in that case, we won't just deal with you on the international trade market. But on the other hand, I think he's kind of realizing now, or getting the experience that, yeah, a lot of countries, especially China, was not hesitant to just retaliate with just as much tariffing, where it's like, well, this is a lose-lose at the end of the day. At least that's what I think. Or maybe, who knows, he's got a like bigger plan and he wants to drive inflation up for some reason, and it's like beneficial to what his master plan is. I have no clue, to be honest.
He's 5 moves ahead, or whatever he wants to
maybe
sort of spin this as.
Maybe, because it is kind of like, a lot of people have looked at it and gone like, well, this is just going to mean more tariffs from more countries and more inflation, and that's exactly what happened during his last presidency, and it affected the UK back then as well. Even though the UK wasn't, directly tariffed, it's like we still get stuff from China, from Europe, from other countries that will be tariffed somewhere else down the line or before. So at the end of the day, those costs have to be carried over to the end consumer somehow. It's the same thing with the UK budget, where they said, oh, we're going to make employers pay more national insurance to help fund things like the NHS and stuff. It's like, fair enough, but at the end of the day, it does mean employers go, oh, damn, our profit margin's been cut off by this much. We're going to have to try and either hire less people or pay people less or get rid of people. Like, they have to find that money again somewhere. So it's like, at the end of the day...
Then they can't pay people... Well, obviously they can only pay people less to what the national minimum wage is.
Oh, yeah, if they're reaching that low, so yeah.
Like, the one thing that really sort of pissed a lot of employers off was when the sort of the national minimum wage was introduced, because they could not get away with paying someone like £1 an hour.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of like a similar issue where it's like, you drive up cost in one area of the chain, and it will have impacts at the end of the chain, no matter how you put it. And a lot of employers in the UK have already said that, where they've said, we'll just be hiring less people then, because we're paying more national insurance, so we just can't afford as many staff. So it's like, at the end of the day...
I suppose job's still going in London, but that's London for you.
Yeah.
That's just all the wealth being sort of concentrated in London, because all the manufacturing got stripped apart, and then, neoliberal politics was all like, oh, we got to make our money off services rather than manufacturing.
Yeah.
And that's how the people like fucking finance and stuff. There you go. I just
Yeah.
swore. I don't care. That was me trying my best to like not swear,
Yeah.
but you know what? It's fine.
Well, I learned the really interesting fact about Brexit and stuff, where it's like our export products have gone from mostly physical products to now mostly service products, because trading is like difficult since Brexit. And I found like that's really interesting. So you're talking about like services and like finance stuff. It's like actually Brexit has like made it even more so that we export mostly services and financial services.
I mean, we don't have a manufacturing like base. Like
Yeah.
the manufacturing got teared apart like in the Thatcher years, and then
oh,
got
man.
finished off by
Thatcher alarm.
like, and then they got ripped apart by Tony Blair like towards the end, because it's like you want to sell services through private companies. That's how
Yeah.
you make the money. Like manufacturing, you just get unions. Like people just unionize, and you know, politics don't like unions.
Yeah, I
Like-
love how it only took, I don't know, 20 minutes, I guess, for Thatcher to
Look,
to
at the
come
end
in.
of the day, it's just people, like certain
It's all
people's
Thatcher.
names are always going to pop up, especially when it comes to the current state where the UK is now.
Yeah.
Like it was a long road to where we got here, and you know, when this whole experiment on neoliberalism started, like in the 80s, like you know, it produced quite a lot of results.
yeah,
But that was like short term. Well, short term. Not short term.
Short
It was
term
quite
it
long
did.
term.
long term is debatable, very debatable.
Well, you could argue that like the golden years was between like the 80s and like 2007 or whatever, like before the recession happened.
Yeah,
Like when the recession happened, that was it. Like, you know, that was when the veil got lifted essentially from this sort of, oh, we just let all the rich people like you know, run the business in terms of like finance and and like just general stuff.
Yeah.
General stuff. I can't even think of the words right now.
general stuff. Yeah, that's again another massive can of worms. To
Well, the
open.
whole thing of
Yeah.
like the credit crunch was because, well, the recession and everything was I always get confused about. I think there's like three different things in such a short space of time. Like there was like a recession, a credit crunch, and that's two. But they're so interchangeable with like the financial crisis and like the recession, because wasn't there like a recession, then a financial crisis?
Yeah, pretty much in 2008 was the latest financial crisis.
God, I've seen.
And then, you know, the whole housing crisis, quote unquote, happened or got more talked about then as well. But I think it was kind of in the making for a while, that one.
But basically, it was like the financial crisis was essentially caused because banks were giving out more loans that they couldn't possibly like enforce. Right? Was that the whole thing?
I'm not sure. I'm not gonna lie. I think that's one area right now, and I've got to say I don't know too much about the 2008 financial crisis.
Well, they bailed out all the banks, didn't they?
Yeah, I know
Because
that
it was the banks who caused it.
Yeah,
like-
I know that. Yeah, basically banks didn't have any liquidity anymore, and they had to get bailed out by the government. But financial crisis 2008. Let's see if we get like a TLDR of what happened in 2008.
Ugh, I was but a 16, 17-year-old then.
I don't know. So yeah, I do remember that it was the main triggering factor was the Lehman Brothers, or Lehman, I don't know how to pronounce that, collapsed, and that is what sent shockwaves through the global financial system. But like the details of it are kind of things I'm a bit foggy on. But it could be another idea for a cool kind of deep dive. You know, what happened in the 2008 financial crisis and its impact on the UK. The story of the downturn. But all I know is like a major bank, Lehman Brothers, collapsed. As in, was overly in debt is what I think. Did not have liquidity anymore, so they didn't have actual cash anymore. And they had to start basically telling customers that they don't actually have the money that these people have in their accounts. And that's also, I do know that this is what triggered one of the updated policies in the UK, so that banks have to guarantee. I think they have to cover at least £80,000 in your account. So like if you got up to £80,000, it is like insured. They have to insure it. So like even if they don't have the cash anymore, they have to have an insurance policy in place so that that insurance company can cover the money. You know, again, if this ever actually happens, the modalities of like whether actually that gets paid out to you is something else, but in the law now, I think that's what it is. So
Doran is currently typing.
yeah, I think you can hear my typing on the microphone, but bank account, I think I don't know what the term is.
We
for,
ran a
like,
tight ship here at Opposably HQ.
guaranteed by
Doran's
government.
office.
It is the office. There you go. So bank protection limit. So this is on. I'm just looking at Money Savings Expert,
Martin Lewis. Woo!
which gotta say I have learned a lot from this. So yeah, so it says protects 100% of the first £85,000 you have saved. So I wasn't far with my 80,000. And again, I could be wrong with the whole like insurance thing, but it is in simple terms, your first £85,000 are protected. Don't know. And you'll be compensated for it. But I do think that came. Something like that already existed, but the 2008 crisis at least led to this policy being strengthened, because so many people actually were said that they were told that money in their bank account just wasn't there anymore. Like it's not actually there. It's like in South Park where they take the money and it's like, and it's gone.
And it's gone.
But yeah, I feel like the 2008 crisis would be an interesting like deep dive subject.
We should really write this down, you know.
All right, yeah. Okay.
So
Ideas.
we've got all these ideas.
Maybe episode 1 should be just called Ideas for Future Subjects.
Isn't this episode 1?
Yeah, this is episode 1.
Oh, I thought we meant that. Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening.
I mean, I should have said, maybe this episode should be called Ideas for Future Subjects. So, let's write it down.
I mean, it's just so much, like, you know, it's weird. Like, we start this podcast thinking, like, oh, we got so much to talk about, and we do, but then as soon as you hit record, it's just sort of like,
So I've got Financial Crisis 2008, Inflation.
Inflation.
I feel like inflation and its impact in the UK would be a really interesting one. And just trying to, like, explain in more simple terms, in a nutshell, what is inflation, what's happening, why are we paying more and more for things? Especially, I mean, again, inflation's been a thing forever, but right now it's a bit more exacerbated than it should. And then we had, the last one was potentially tariffs. Tariffs and their impact. But yeah, I mean, we've already gone around a few subjects.
I mean, yeah.
I think that, so I'm still figuring out how to record podcasts, everyone. So I don't know how long we've been recording, and I can't tell based on my app here. Oh no, it does say here 28 minutes. That's okay. We've still got a bit of time to do a decent podcast episode. What length do we want our episodes to be? Should they just be all over the place or consistent?
Just let it happen, man. Just let it happen.
Just let it happen. All right. And how are you feeling about this episode right now? Should it keep going, or are we kind of done?
Oh no! Like, you know, just have a chat. Like,
just have a chat.
Let's just vibe. Like, you
Let's
know,
just
what do you want to talk about? Like, you know.
I want to talk about what? There's so many things, but also I don't want to open a massive can of worms.
Open the can of worms.
Open the can of worms.
Open it up, man.
Okay. Do you think Keir Starmer is going to play buddies with the USA, or actually try and rebuild links with the EU, or try a mix of both and end up kind of doing a bit of everything, not so well.
Well, Rachel Reeves went over to China like a few weeks ago to sort of reestablish that link. So they're trying to sort of, just get that relationship back up with China, because they know just how much of a powder keg it is in the US right now. And obviously it doesn't help that Elon Musk is there just tweeting away, just being like, oh, Starmer's a shit prime minister, should be locked up, they're nonce enablers or whatever. And it's just like...
Yes, I forgot about that he accused him of, entertaining child molesters and stuff. It's like, come on.
If we get one more inquiry, I'm actually going to scream. Is just... We've already had an inquiry, and all the recommendations that are made to be implemented weren't even implemented by the Tories. The Tories had 14 years to implement all these recommendations, and now Kemi Badenoch is there, just on a little high horse, being like, "Oh, we need to start a new investigation." It's like, bugger off! There already has been an investigation, and your part, and she was even in government. I'm pretty sure she was working in the government as an MP. When these changes are recommended. So, it's all well and good. It's like, when Conservatives are putting up things now, being like, oh, we're going to make sure the immigrants can't claim benefits. And it's just like, oh, fuck off. I don't even care if I'm swearing now, but it's just, you realise, 20 years ago, and still quite recently, in terms of, we're thinking probably... If we're going back to 2012, 2013, the whole thing was just about working class scroungers are the ones who were claiming all the benefits and
the benefit scroungers.
The benefit scroungers, and now it's now it's immigrants apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a weird one though, because it was so obviously you had the Conservatives being like, oh, it's working class people who are not being so socially conscious of climbing up the ladder of the class system to become middle class. That kind of thing. And then you had the other, the far right, so the right wing that goes a bit further to the right, let's say it that way. They just go oh, how about we just blame Polish people? Do you remember do you not remember the years that people used to be like, oh, the bloody Polish stealing our jobs.
They took our jobs!
They took our jobs!
Yeah, no, I do remember that, and I remember just being a bit like, what the hell? I'm happy to go to the corner shop and have my my Polish, my Chinese, my Indian corner shops, But it was always... What's there to complain about?
But it was literally the Polish. It was always the Polish or just some Eastern European or whatever. Yeah. And now... These days, we don't have many Polish immigrants as much as we do, because they all decided to go back to Poland, and now Poland's thriving or something like that. Poland as a country is thriving from all the money that the Polish made here, and it's ridiculous. They just always change tack. In terms of when parties who use others to blame problems, when they find a use for a group, how the right wing have found a use for working class people. Yeah. They completely ignore it.
And I mean, the GDP of Poland has gone up massively in 2021, 2022. In 2023, though, 0.1% growth. That is tough. But last year, 2.9%. I don't want to say nonsense, but I think that's actually better than the UK. But again,
but basically, in terms of, from what I've read, in terms of Polish immigration, we're not getting, or just Eastern European migration, in general. They've all, ever since Brexit as well, they've just taken the money and just gone and reinvested it into Poland or something, and now that's how they're getting the growth, because it's amazing, really, how sort of economics work when people get paid. And invest in their country.
And that's, to be fair, a lot of people who were against this whole Polish immigration probably would say, well, now they're thriving in their own country, sort of thing, and we were right. And it's I see what you mean, but I feel in general, sharing and like multiculturalism is actually something that's really, really beneficial to society.
Of course it is.
And again, I would be very biased in saying this, being from Europe, basically, come to the UK, and kind of mixed nationalities myself. I just feel like,
I mean, in the entirety of human history, there has been multiculturalism that's appeared in many forms. Like, Jesus Christ, Genghis Khan, man. Like, you know.
Yeah. Oh God.
He spread it around. Alexander the Great. Like, you know, it's just multiculturalism is a natural thing. Like,
they were both like kind of tyrants, though, right?
Yeah,
but I see what you mean. But also, like, they may not be the most.
But in terms of like the cultural sort of,
they created exchange. Yeah, at least they created exchange. But yeah, I see what you're trying to say, and I feel like it does.
And then America, benefits. Like, oh my God, like America is literally just the home of like, and I know politicians just go like, oh, multiculturalism, that's what, you know, all the fighting. It's like, no, all the fighting happens because you know, people aren't doing enough to help everyone. They just helping a few people, not everyone.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a problem, and also when you get to this sort of thought, it's like, you know, at the end of the day, everyone's a sort of immigrant, one way or the other. If you go back enough generations, you're not properly from where you are. Someone would look at your family tree and go back a few generations, and be like, you're not proper English. You know, so it's like they're really moot debates after a while. A bit like, again, Musk say, you know, purebred American, whatever. It's like,
American, Jesus
it's like,
Christ.
I don't know if he says that. I'm pretty sure he does say, you know, he's like a American dream stereotype and stuff like that. But
he's there, like,
he's actually an immigrant. You know, like,
he's there, like, doing that video call for that German far right party, being like, there's nothing wrong about being proud to be German and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's look, you are allowed to be proud of your country, like you are,
but
your pride.
He's entertaining a certain group of people saying that.
Yeah,
I feel like that's the problem.
Kind of pride. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a different. He's just entertaining those different kind of prides that we not necessarily like. Great,
right? Yeah.
Like, not necessarily. Yeah. I mean, a lot.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't know, you know, about his like pride stuff. But all I know is that, you know, he is quite anti-immigrant, all whilst actually being an immigrant himself. That's the point
he's
I
not
was
anti-immigrant
making.
when it comes to, like, you know, cheap labour.
Exactly.
Like those H1 visas in America. That whole debacle of him being like, all of a sudden, like, a proud immigrant after, you know, entertaining Donald Trump's ideas of like mass deportation, and all of a sudden he's a proud immigrant.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's okay. These are the immigrants that, like, you know, have all the skills, and then we can pay less, and then we can deport them because once we sack them, they don't have their visa, so then they can just go home. Like, it's very much the case of an employer is controlling a worker's ability to get paid and to live in a country, essentially.
Yeah, and again, it's like, we've had this conversation a few times, like, oh, you know, how many times must we come back to Elon Musk? But the thing is, he is actually having a massive impact on the world right now, right? Like, that, you can't deny that, and it is relevant to the UK as well.
The guy owns, like, a big platform.
Yeah.
He's a modern day media baron. That's what he is. Like,
yeah.
He is the Rupert Murdoch of, let's just say, of the online space. Like, he has a massive platform. Like, he's got algorithmic advantages because he can just, you know, tell his engineers to do like a little code or whatever.
Yeah.
So certain things get boosted.
Yeah.
What was it? The strange statistic of, like, he has done less for free speech since he has taken control. Than what Twitter was before.
Yeah.
Or something ridiculous like that.
More for his version of free speech. But yeah, I did see an article somewhere saying, you know, that his posts have been the most highlighted since he bought it. And I was like, well, of course they are. You know, he bought the thing, and now he can, as you say, pretty much skew things a tiny bit so that his voice and people who echo his opinions can be amplified, whilst people who don't get a bit nerfed on the algorithm. Not enough to be too obvious, but just a bit.
But the left sort of leaning voices are getting nerfed on the algorithm now.
They are,
and you know, he was there like this whole time being like, well, Jack Dorsey and whoever are like, you know, that those conservative voices on online spaces are like getting throttled, and now he's doing the same thing. Like, okay, yeah, sure, you had an argument, but a broken clock is right twice a day. Like, unfortunately, people like Elon Musk are always gonna sort of have one good idea to support the array of shitty ideas that they have. Like,
and
isn't that how like politics like works? And
it is. And just to be clear, we don't want this to be like the bagging on Elon Musk podcast, but we do want to talk about current issues. I think no matter if you're a fan or someone who really doesn't like Elon Musk, he is a current issue. Like, you got to discuss it regardless. Like, whether you're super into what he's doing or like you hate what he's doing, I feel like it's worth discussing, because in general it is his work with the US government right now is probably going to set the tone for how
unfortunately
tech giants influence politics.
I mean, he is going to get bagged on eventually. Like, he is going to end up getting bagged on. Like, we can only make a promise. Like, we are very clear that we do have our views. And I think we've already sort of established that we're not exactly the biggest fans of like Elon Musk, like, but that's fine. Like,
Look, I want to be objective at the same time, but yes.
I mean,
I feel like we should be clear about
like, I can be objective.
Our own biases / opinions from the get-go,
But I'm using my freedom of speech right now.
Yes, exactly.
Like, this freedom of speech that apparently is absolutely paramount to these, these tech oligarchs.
It's paramount as long as you say something I agree with.
Yeah, exactly. But, sure. Yeah.
But, yeah, so,
But look, obviously now he's sort of fallen out with Nigel Farage in the UK.
Yeah, that happened so fast. I was saying to Elliot how I was so happy when that happened. I was like, my hope is that he's so fickle that he can't make an ally more than like a few months before it just falls apart. They do one thing he doesn't like, and it's like, oh, you should be fired now. And I was like, if there's one thing I can value in Nigel Farage's following now, is that they really like Nigel Farage, so that Musk was never going to convince them not to, keep him as their leader, right? I feel like he really lost a lot of credo with that party then.
Look, the issue is now, like, he has essentially put $100 million or 80 million pounds, if you want to sort of, like, if you're doing it in whatever currency you want to discuss.
Way too much money, in other words.
He's put that on the table, and you're seeing now that Kemi Badenoch is doing all these sort of super, like, oh, we're against culture war and all, we hate woke, and, just really doubling down on that. Because they're literally just, cupping Elon's balls to get, like, that donation.
Cupping the balls.
And that is the biggest donation that any UK party would hypothetically get. Like, it's mad.
It is mad. It would have been the most money I think any party ever got in UK history, but it hasn't happened, hasn't materialised. But yeah, just for context, Elon Musk wanted to donate. How much did you say? How much money was it?
$100 million.
Was it? Okay.
Or 80 million pounds.
I think it was 80 million pounds, which is like the largest amount ever. Like, even like, the Conservative Party with their friends and, financial interests never got such a high donation. And that would have been by a margin, like the largest by quite a margin, but it didn't happen. And it was just funny to see that, Farage said one thing that Musk didn't agree with about, what was his name?
Tommy Robinson.
There you go, about Robinson. And that was it. It was like, now you should quit. You shouldn't be the leader of the party anymore. And I was like, well, that personally plays in my personal benefit, because I would rather Musk not interfere in our politics, and he's just kind of put himself out there.
But he has basically just left that money on the table now, because there's no rules. There are no rules in this country to dictate like anything. I'm not sure. Look at that. See if there's like any sort of like laws in terms of like political funding.
So there are, but there's no limit. So again, that could be an interesting like conversation to have more in depth, but we
do have like
there are some
donors in this country, but we don't have donors to the extent of like America with their super PACs or whatever they're called. like, you know, these billionaires going like, we're going to donate like all the money to you.
Yeah. So,
and I know that Ed Davey sort of stood up in Parliament and sort of made like the suggestion that they need to do some reforms on party donations, just because $100 million or £80 million. I'm just going to say $100 million just because, you know, that's the currency that he's going to throw around, because, you know, Elon just wants to sort of maintain this whole America's like the reserve currency of the world.
Yeah.
But that amount of money going into a single political party is ridiculous.
Insane.
That is ridiculous. That is you essentially buying an election.
So I've actually got a nice piece of reporting made by instituteforgovernment.org.uk about political funding in the UK, and more or less what we were saying was, you know, in the right ballpark. That, as an example, in 2023, the Conservative Party got a total of donations of nearly 60 million. And that's the top. That was the top amount led.
But that's from membership fees, donations, and other private funding sources.
And that's everything added up. So, like, Musk wanted to give 80 million. So that's like nearly twice as much as the total donations
of
for
his
the
own
Conservative
money.
Party. Yeah. So it's like he was clearly trying to funnel in way more money that's ever been seen in this sort of area before. But it's also another interesting thing. So Labour got 50 million, so only a bit less. The Lib Dems 7.9, and Reform, you know, last year, 2023, got 1.4 million in total. So imagine Reform would have gone from, you know, one of the smallest funded parties to the single richest party in terms of donations overnight. And it would have skewed the election results. We all know that. And also, so I know this whole debacle has started a conversation in government about regulation, but it does say here as well that there's no limits on how much you can be donated to as a political party, as long as it's considered a permissible source.
A permissible source? Yeah. What does that mean?
And that I do not know. That would be interesting to see what's called a permissible source. But it is, even in this article, it's in quotes, scare quotes. It makes me think that there's probably not that many rules. But yeah, interesting, the fact that there's no limit actually. So Musk could have given that amount of money and it not be illegal.
So that's even crazy to think now. So all these years in the UK, there hasn't been any regulation in terms of how much you can spend, but no one has done it. So it's literally been the case of like, you know, it's just been a handshake deal of being like, we're not going to sort of go too overboard. But I guess now we live in this world where it's just like somebody is there like throwing all this money around, and hopefully...
Yeah, I do think it is very much a case of like, this has actually never happened. And that's why we need to ask ourselves the questions, because it never happened that someone wanted to throw in that much money in like funding for a party. Yeah, it's really interesting. So
but yeah, like, you know, we will try our best to give some balanced sort of view on stuff, but
yeah,
I mean, we can't promise like anything. Like, or at least all we can be is transparent, and you know, and I do understand, like, you know, I don't really understand like why Elon's like the way he is. I mean, actually no, that's a lie. I do know how it is.
Kind of.
That is very much a case of, I say like, oh, it's because he's rich. People are going to be like, oh, wow, this person's a commie, like a communist, and it's just like, oh.
And that's why, as part of this, when we do a slightly more prepared subject, I would like to prepare a few like arguments that are completely against what we both think, to just kind of go, okay, shall we pick this apart and try and see, you know, what's the extreme opposite view of what we're saying? But a lot of times we will disagree amongst ourselves. I can predict that anyway, so we'll have enough of debate.
WhatsApp messages between each other.
So,
I mean, how about we establish potential? Let's give a bit of background. Like, so if we are talking about, I think it is best to sort of talk about how we sort of view the world politically.
Yeah,
I think it's a good idea just to sort of be transparent. The fact that we obviously have our own sort of political views.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say we're the vast majority very similar people
Yeah.
with like slight differences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe in terms of like, you know, we'll call it the Marxist
Yeah.
approach to life versus like the
because
the
of
capitalist approach to life.
yeah, because I've seen in real, well, not seen, but like studied in real life how communism always led to like really uneven governments and like exploitation. I'm like, actually, yeah, in theory it makes sense, but in practice it never did. So I'm not really down with it in that sense. But it's only because of, you know, in real life this is how this worked out, sort of thing. Like on paper the ideas make sense, but in reality, apart from in that show on Amazon Prime based on the game, was it Last of Us? I think it is Last of Us. They have like a like communist commune.
Oh yeah, Last of Us.
So that's the literally only example. I'm like, if there would be a zombie apocalypse, then maybe it would work because people would have no choice but to work together.
Actually, no. It's more. I would say actually, it's more down to the fact that if it's a smaller amount of people, then it's easier to maintain a communist society.
Yeah,
like,
smaller amount of people, much more need to cooperate because it's a deadly, deadly, deadly environment, sort of thing. I'm
like,
like,
let's ignore the whole like sort of zombie,
The
the
zombie
hypothetical like zombie side. But if we are literally talking about like a communism in the sense of the population of this country, or whatever, it's like a smaller population, like.
yeah,
Maybe it could work. I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm not but no, I'm not a communist.
Me neither.
Very much. I'm very much a capitalist in a lot of ways.
Mm.
Well, in a vast majority of ways. I do think it's. I like business and all that kind of thing, but I care about competition. I care about, you know.
Yeah, competition, good.
Competition is good. Like
Competition
rising
good.
tides lift all boats. Like, I'm a vast believer of that mantra, and I think it's good to apply a little bit of Marxist theory to it
Yeah,
because, you know, left-wing theory has shown to it there's been a lot of good to it. Like, without people like Marx, that we wouldn't have gotten stuff like a welfare system or free healthcare. Unions especially. And I mean, we can go into a whole, depending what kind of generation you are, like in the UK, for example, if you talking to someone who grew up in the 70s, they're going to have a very different view on union. The 70s and the 80s, they're going to have quite a view of unions just being like, oh, they held up society because, you know, they refused to work. And it's just like, well, they refused to work because, you know, they're getting an unfair deal. However, I mean, that's another thing. Put that on the list, unions. Like, yeah. I'm not sure, like, I know Maggie Thatcher, bringing her again.
Here we go again.
She very much did have a vendetta against the coal miners.
Oh, yeah.
Because the coal miners were responsible for practically ousting a Conservative Prime Minister like 10 years before.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously when the whole coal mining situation came around, when coal wasn't as profitable as it used to be, she also thought this was a good time to sort of, you know, get some revenge on like the coal miners, and, you know, just sort of make a stand against unions, tell them she's not going to get fucked with, and then that kind of put a kibosh on a lot of unions, and we're kind of where we're at now.
Yeah,
I mean, the last union that I know who's made a dent of any sort of like movement was the train unions.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
like they're the last like sort of mainstream union that's caused like a fuss in this country.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, that's a whole other thing as well, where I'm like, man, they have caused quite a fuss, but also terrible conditions, but also prices so high for people in the UK that it's really hard to have empathy sometimes, because you're like, I am paying so much for my commute. And it never works. It's just like, it's a lose-lose for everyone. But yeah, anyway, yeah, I think same for me. I think you could describe me as left-leaning. And also, you know, I'm also of the views like capitalism works. It's okay. It's the best system we've had so far because, God, you know, we've seen how other things have worked out, and most other things have not worked out very well. I think TLDR of that is that it usually is not ideal. So yeah, I think,
but we can argue that we're not living in a capitalist society anymore.
right, and that's one thing we're going to come to. I think a lot is like, you know,
We live in a
capitalism
corporate-
okay, but also right now we're living more and more in a what we'd call late stage capitalism. What a lot of people corporatism.
Techno-feudalism.
Techno-feudalism. So that's the sort of thing we will probably end up talking about, and how, like, yeah, of course there's a lot of improvement to be made, and I think, honestly, that's why I'm a bit left-leaning. I'm like, you know, we need to progress and make things a bit better rather than conserve things as they are, because clearly things as they are don't quite work how we want them. But, you know, I think it's easy. I could easily say it's like, depending on the election, I can be slightly right-wing leaning or slightly left-wing leaning, depending on what people are saying. So, yeah, I think that's kind of the best I can put it, and also it's very changing from week to week, month to month. Views change a lot, especially mine. So take this all with a grain of salt.
I mean,
guess.
it would be good just to be able to get the opportunity to actually sort of look into stuff ourselves, like, you know, and talk to experts and stuff.
Well,
like,
yeah,
that would be cool. Like,
it would be cool to, yeah. Of
I
course,
would love to be able to do
have
my own
interviews.
groundwork.
Yeah,
I would like to do my own groundwork to get but obviously I have my own job I've got to, like, at the moment I don't have the autonomy to be able to do that kind of thing. Hopefully we'll be able to.
we'll get to that. I think, yeah, if this could become a bit more journalistic, it would be quite cool. Where we're like, you know, we're doing a bit of research, we're getting people to, like, interview with us and give us their opinions as experts and stuff. And yeah, that would be really cool to have a bit more, like, sourcing and backing to what we say sometimes, but also have it be a fluid conversation. I think that would be, like, the ideal sort of middle ground there. Yeah. So,
But I can definitely going to warn you that I am probably going to veer a lot left wing in a lot of things. Like, I am
That's
probably
fair.
I am probably going to sound like a commie, essentially.
oh
But,
god.
I mean, I'm not. Like, I don't want to sort of be, like I said, I like capitalism, but this is not capitalism we live in anymore. And then
Yeah.
when people talk about, because it's funny, because when people say stuff like, oh, wealth redistribution, like, they automatically just go, oh, that's communism. And it's like, well, we don't, like, no, not necessarily. This is more the case of being like, you know, there's too many people taking a lot of resources.
Things could be a bit better, yeah. For me, it depends on the issue. Like, as I said, dependent on the issue, I could go either side. Because there's some things I feel very, like, what people would call traditionally left-wing, and there's other issues where people would traditionally, like, classify that as, like, right-wing. Where it depends on what we're talking about. But yeah, I feel like we're gonna strike a good balance. We'll do that. And if not, if we agree too much, I will just research facts and things that people completely on the other spectrum would say and throw them at us and be like, "What do you think of this?" Just to, like, make it a bit more balanced, you know. Anyway, we've been going for a good 58 minutes now. Do we think it's good to call it a day on this first episode?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Is there anything else you want to sort of broach?
I'm okay. I just, maybe once we do have enough followers or listeners to do a bit of a listener mail at the end, that would be fun. But for
Comment sections.
exactly, for episode 1 we can't quite do that. But in the future it would be cool to finish with here's a message we got from someone. And that could go so wrong so fast.
It's like, love your show. Though some of your political opinions maybe are shit. Like, I don't know.
It's okay.
I anticipate there is going to be, like, depending who hears it, it's probably going to be split right down the middle.
As long as we get people thinking about things, I think I'm quite happy about that.
Like, I know for a fact that we are... The one thing that we are going to make very clear is stuff like the migrant crisis is the most overblown situation ever, and it is being utilised by a lot of bad actors, and I will
But,
gladly keep saying that. And you may have the opinion of being like, oh well, the immigrants are doing, like, the migrants are doing. That's the thing. There's such a distinction between immigrants and migrants.
That's
Like, I don't
exactly
think people.
what I was going to say.
I don't think people actually understand what the
That's the
actual
first
term
thing
is
I would
anymore.
talk about. I'd be like, first we have to, like, clarify.
But it's just, I fathom to believe that. Quick Google. Have a quick Google about how many migrants, like, there currently are the one, like, small boat crossing migrants. Like, those are the ones that are causing the most hullabaloo
Crossing migrants. I mean,
in the UK right now.
UK. I do know from that Jimmy the Giant video that it was.
Shout out to Jimmy the Giant.
Yes, definitely shout out. But I do know that it's a fraction of, like, most immigration and migration.
I'll put it this way: we don't have like a million. We don't have like 2 million migrants from small boat crossings, like, in the UK right now. Like, that's just ridiculous.
There you go. To be fair, there you go. So it's people crossing the English Channel in boats. So you've got all years. So from 2021, it was roughly 29,000. In 2024, it's 35,000. So it's really a fraction of, like, overall.
But I refuse to believe that 35,000 people are causing an NHS to collapse, are slowing growth. Like, no. It's a ridiculous thing to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
And then Nigel Farage is there just sort of going like, I won't do this, I won't do that, but then he won't actually give, like, actual sort of solutions. Like, he's all just...
Yeah.
This is what's wrong in the country, and then
like,
he doesn't give any sort of...
Yeah, but I feel like maybe what works in the argumentative they're using is, like, no money should be wasted at all on these people. They're trying to get here illegally, which I don't agree with. But I think that's probably where he gets a lot of following, is, like, he just goes on the line of, like, it doesn't matter if it's, like, a fraction of the spending we have for, like, unemployment and stuff. It's still too much. Like, 1% for these people is too much, and that 1% could go for the working class.
Let's just say in a hypothetical world then that Farage comes in, he gets his wish of applying zero migrants, right? Yeah. So he's got rid of 35,000 people.
They're all, like, sinking in the sea.
Yeah.
Being sent in the Atlantic to
Nigel
fare for
Farage
themselves.
Is there, standing on the cliffs of Dover with a little
shooting
musket,
flaming arrows,
with his cigarette and his pint, being like, "Oh, I have done it." Oh, that's not how he sounds. Like, I'm not even trying to do a Nigel Farage impression. But
I love how we wanted the first episode to be tame, and here we are.
You know what? I don't care. Like, but let's say hypothetically he gets his wish, and all those migrants are gone.
Yeah.
And the problems still stand. Who's he going to blame then?
There's probably another group in line.
It'll be the working class. It'll be the working class that he has worked so, like...
The scroungers. The benefit scroungers, Elliot.
Yeah, it'll be them again.
It will be. To be fair, that's quite... that's actually a good prediction.
I will give Nigel Farage credit. Like, he was very careful in blaming, like, white working class people for, like, benefit scrounging and stuff.
He knows people vote for him. I mean, that's a lot of his
Well, because
voting
obviously what he was doing, the same as what the BNP were doing, was they were just catering to the idea of, like, it's not your fault, it's the other fault. So they did that. It was like Conservatives who were there just blaming like the working class or whatever for sort of being a drain on society.
Yeah,
I'll try and get my words out then. But as soon as they're gone, then what's he going to say? Like, either he's got to sort of admit that a vast amount of money has really fucked over a lot of people.
Yeah.
In this country.
And that, in fact, the people really screwing us over are the very rich foreign investors in London.
Because he wants to get rid of the welfare state. Like, he's there being like... So, what was it in the manifesto? The Reform Manifesto. He was there being like, if you don't get to see a doctor in X amount of time, you should get a voucher to go see a private, like... GP, because the end goal is he wants to get rid of like the NHS and stuff like that. Like, he is very much the case of he is very America adjacent in terms of MAGA, in terms of what he wants. Like, he wants no more welfare state. He wants all the billionaires controlling like whatever. It's just like they're controlling the business. The government doesn't have to do anything. Like, they just gotta, at the bare minimum, like, keep things running.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's wild. One thing he does manage to capitalize on is that, you know, outside of EU, migration and immigration has gone up like crazy since Brexit. Because I don't know why, but it has, and like people from the EU have been immigrating way less. That's obvious, is because it's way more difficult for them than they used to. And I think Farage has capitalized on that very well by being like, look, like, immigration has only gone up since Brexit. It's not doing what we want, and we need to crack down on it. And it's like, it's funny because Brexit is actually the thing that caused this in the first place.
But what I also don't understand is, like, he's there, like, he was campaigning for years about leaving, like, the EU.
Yeah, look at this graph. So we're on the BBC right now, just looking at a graph of, like, asylum application. And you see from 2019 onwards, it has exploded. Like, obviously, that also is linked to things like the Ukraine war and, like, Israel. But
and every other war that happens, like, in the Middle East and Africa.
But also, why are they coming to, like, the UK? Like, there's a reason, though. I think it's because now it's probably just as complicated to go here than anywhere else. The UK is quite a, like, desirable place to seek shelter. And, you know, it's just, if the UK was still in the EU, we would probably be able to spread out things a bit easier. But now the EU is kind of like, well, screw you guys, we're just going to send everyone your way. I just don't know. I feel like that's another subject we could really go in depth in, because it's really interesting.
Yeah,
it's like, why did immigration go up since Brexit?
But then but then there's another thing as well. It's like Nigel Farage is there like, I want to sort of get out from the EU because we don't want to be in the pockets of, like, European bureaucrats, blah, 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 blah. But now he's more than willing to accept a donation, he used to anyway, but he was more than happy to accept a donation from a foreign entity.
Yeah.
Like, and then also cozy up, make deals with the US. So then it would be pretty much he's doing the US's bidding. So he just wants a different master to, like, answer to, essentially. He just wants, like, and obviously the EU essentially was a regulatory body in a nutshell. In a lot of ways, it was a regulatory body on, like, goods and stuff. And he doesn't want that regulation because he's a super capitalist. Like, he wants people to be able to, you know, make money, like, unfettered.
No one likes regulations. No one wants it. It's always the same. That's why. I mean, we left Europe. Part of why we left Europe in the first place.
I mean, obviously as well, the whole immigration thing.
Yeah, that as well. I mean, I do know that the part of the immigration boost is due to universities, because universities, you know, they also suffered from cost of living, cost of everything going up, and international students.
Oh, but universities didn't help themselves either. Like, universities have been a for-profit business for years now. Ever since the tuition fees, like, went up to, like, £9,000. Like, they're a business. Like, we live in Portsmouth, and that university, like, all it does is just seize all the property to make halls, and it's just always expanding.
They're
like,
privatised, though. That's not university anymore. They're privatised. They're mostly private.
What, the halls?
Yeah.
No.
They're actually not university owned anymore, like the vast majority of them. But yes, it has become a massive business.
But they've been brokers. But they've essentially been the brokers for these deals with these private companies, though.
They have made the market there. They like created the market. But basically, what I was going to say is, like, international students pay a lot higher fees than students from the UK, and therefore the universities had every interest to get more people coming in. So I think part of the kind of immigration boost from outside the EU is partly due to that, and then there's a lot more due to, you know, conflict overall and things like that.
Maybe.
But yeah, I feel like,
anyways,
universities being a for-profit business is another really interesting thing to talk about in the UK, where it's like, it is becoming a bit problematic because now the government, like, moderates it. But yeah, basically the government moderates it, but at the same time it's a for-profit business now, and there's no choice on the university side to not be a for-profit business anymore. So I think it's very easy on the one hand to point the finger and realize all their fault, but on the other hand there's been a lot of pressure from the government to generate that income, and at the end of the day the government is the one to actually regulate all these tuition fees. It's not the universities, so it's a bit complicated. We'll put it this. But yeah, all right. We've been recording for quite a while now, so I think it is time. I am gonna say it's time we call it a day, Elliot. On this first episode, that was fun. Again, pleasure talking, and I think for next time we'll probably try and have a set subject, but it's probably gonna follow a very meandery, loose structure again. Just so you're warned, it is going to be more of this. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Ta-ta.
Ta-ta.